Hello, my name is Kevin Tudor, and I'm one of the three hosts of Almost Major, a film podcast dissecting many major indie studios and the films they release. Every week, myself, Charlie Nash, and Bryden Doyle discuss overlooked, forgotten, or bona fide classic indie films via studio-specific miniseries. We've previously covered numerous films from Artisan Entertainment, Lionsgate Films, and New Line Cinema. Titles including The Blair Witch Project, American Psycho, Dogville, But I'm a Cheerleader, Saw, Requiem for a Dream, and Ringmaster, you know, the Jerry Springer film. Anyways, we have a fun time every week and we hope you will join us. Subscribe to Almost Major wherever you get your podcasts. Now proudly a part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Have you ever wanted to dive deeper into the horror movies you love? Beyond the Blood is a horror podcast for fans who want more than just surface level screams. We do deep dives into the movies that shaped us, digging into director commentaries, behind the scenes stories, deleted scenes, and the special features that most people skip. Each episode is a love letter to the genre. We break down how these films were made, the creative risks that paid off or didn't, and the lasting impact they've had on the genre as a whole. From 70s slashers to modern nightmares, we celebrate the craft, chaos, and characters that keep us coming back. If you're the kind of fan who rewatches movies with the commentary on, or you simply grew up in the video store horror aisle, the Beyond the Blood podcast was made for you. New episodes every single week. Subscribe, and let's dig deep. Welcome to the Beyond the Blood podcast.
And welcome to the Kulturecast. I'm Chris Stachiw, and I'm joined by my good friend. This seems to be a reoccurring theme this month. Hopefully it'll be the case moving forward every now and then, or every other week, it seems like. The host of the Projection Booth podcast, Mr. Mike White.
I'm just here to commit a little suicide.
Oh, dear. Sweet baby Jesus. So we are wrapping up Samurai September on this Kulturecast with a look at 1962's Harakiri, directed by Masaki Kobayashi.
今さらそれを申してどうなる。たとえどのような魂胆があっても、押して無拍子にでも腹は切らせる。笑うやつは勝手に笑うがいい。人それぞれの心など到底計り知れるものではない。呵責なき幕府の制約のため、罪なくして死刑を滅ぼされ、奈落の底に喘ぎうごめいている浪人者の悲哀など、異色に憂いのない人には所詮わからん。よまいごとはそれだけか。武士の面目などと申す者は単にその上辺だけを語る者。控えろ、継も半四郎。どうした
さあ、もう時刻ゆえあげましょう。
いいかい嬉しいが感動
All right, so like I mentioned, the film is directed by Masaki Kobayashi. It stars Tatsuya Nakadai. Yes, that's Tatsuya Nakadai. If you've been following along, if you've been playing along this month, Tatsuya Nakadai played one of the two main characters in Kiru, aka Kill, earlier this month. It also stars Rentaru Mikuni and Akira Ishihama. Film follows Tatsuya Nakadai as a warrior without a lord who goes to a palace to commit seppuku, aka the titular Harakiri. So, Mike, I'm going to kick it to you immediately. What did you think of Harakiri?
I loved this movie. I had never seen this one before. It had been on my to-watch list for a long time, and I just had never gotten to it. So that's why I was like, oh, yeah, I'll be on this episode. And I was not disappointed. I love the story structure. I love the acting. I love the directing. I love what it had to say. I was really impressed with this film.
So I'm going to take you one further. I'm going to say this is one of the best films I've ever seen, without a doubt. The performance from Tatsuya Nakadai may be one of the best performances I've ever seen in a film. The kind of the dichotomy between the two performances that, like you said, mentioning the story structure right off the bat, the way the story is structured, you kind of get to see the arc of the character kind of in a wave. It's kind of back and forth, which is a really cool way of doing it. But the acting is great. Like you mentioned, it has a lot to say. It has a lot of interesting things to say, specifically about, us versus them, the government versus the people, the government versus those, the haves and the have-nots, the franchised and the disenfranchised. So it has a lot to say about that. But ultimately, it's a absolutely fantastic movie that I think has a place in the pantheon of the greatest films ever made. And I don't say that lightly, and I'm not even sure I've ever said that on a podcast before, at least not on the Kulturecast. I mean, I said it when we did Glengarry Glen Ross the first time I was on the projection booth, that's one of my favorite films, and I think it's one of the best movies ever made. This is definitely, without a doubt, one of the best films I've ever watched, and it is a captivating film with some captivating performances, and that is an understatement in so many ways.
Yeah, as this movie was unfolding before my eyes, I was just like, this is something special. I realized it as I was watching it and just was riveted throughout the entire thing. The way that they use editing to do the kind of flashbacks, so much of this movie relies on that story structure, as well as the repetition of a lot of things, especially repetition of dialogue. The very first few minutes of this movie, I was a little confused as far as who I was watching, what I was watching, because there are introductions of two main characters right off the bat, and they say almost the exact same thing. And it took me a minute to realize, one of these is a flashback and one of these is current time. And then once I finally got my mind wrapped around that, I was just like, oh, that's really smart the way that they're doing this. And then as the story starts to really play out, I was like, oh, no wonder it had that rhythm at the beginning, and no wonder it's following this now. And you can kind of see where it's going, maybe like 2/3 of the way through. But even then, you're like, I'm not sure exactly how this is going to play out. So it really does just grab you and hold on to you and say, no, I'm going to tell you this story. And you're not quite sure what's going to happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, when the film starts, you're introduced to Tatsuya Nakadai, Tsugumo Hanshiro, who is a disenfranchised samurai, otherwise known as, for us gaijin, a ronin. Which apparently, if you didn't know that, that's what that means.
I'm glad you pronounced it Ronin and not Ronin.
Ronin. One of them there Ronins.
Are you a Ronin?
Are you a Ronin?
Is this a John Frankenheimer film? Yeah.
I did not know that that's what Ronin meant, again, being a gaijin. So you're introduced to his character, and like you said, there's a little bit of a... To cop George Lucas, there's a little bit of poetry back and forth with the characters between Tsugomu and Matome, who is the other character that you kind of see in the flashbacks initially. And like you said, you kind of know where this is going later in the film, but at the beginning, it does a really good job of flipping your expectations on their head. And it does a little like a kind of a Rashomon thing where it's like when you see it from the other character's perspective, you completely understand like what's going on in a different way, as opposed to the way you initially saw it through the description of the, oh God, what the fuck is this? What is the guy? The counselor?
Yeah, he's just basically like Lord of the Manor kind of thing.
Yeah. So you see it through the eyes of him recounting it to Tsugomo, and then when you hear the way the story ends up playing out, it's a complete 180 in the way that you kind of interpret the characters and the actions that are told to you earlier on in the film.
So should we get into the plot a little bit?
I think so, yeah. Again, it's a pretty dense movie. Like, it's dense, but it's less confusing than Kill was. And I think that that's because the way they do the flashbacks is a little easier to decipher because it's someone telling a story, and that's the way the flashbacks work.
Well, and also with Kill, so much of that hinged upon Bushido and expectations of what a samurai is and what a good samurai is. And these, one guy had been a samurai, one guy's trying to be a samurai. In this movie, we also are talking a lot about Bushido, the whole way of the samurai and the whole idea of the honor and these things. So much of it is the idea of Bushido is just this false ideal that people are clinging to. And it is basically destroying lives in that it is so rigid and people have to follow these rules that really just don't account for human lives, that they only account for the ideal situation and not for the reality of it.
Well, and it's also, like you mentioned, it's an indictment of the Bushido way, which is, like you mentioned, the strict samurai kind of code of arms, the rules of the samurai. And it's an indictment of systems that leave no room for change and systems that leave no room for interpretation or leeway or even emotional decisions. It's an indictment of systems that also oppress others. Well, then that's not really the Bushido in a way. That's more, it's kind of an indictment of the shogunate later in the film, because the shogunate ends up being the reason that a lot of the film happens, because the shogun displaced the lords of Japan. But it's such an interesting story, and it's one that we haven't seen at all this month, because it's a much more emotional story of samurai and loss and, what it means to, like you said, to deal with the system that is so unwavering in its rigidity.
You won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times. Or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months. Or the Rogue heat-baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
Hello, this is Aaron West. I am the author of the A24 New Wave. In this book, I look at A24's output and I make the argument that we are in a new wave movement right now. A24 plays a major role. This book has a supplemental podcast where each episode is a brief conversation about an A24 related topic, whether an actor, director, or even a genre. As I continue research for the book and conduct interviews, I expect to record podcast episodes with people involved with the company. You can find the podcast at cinejourneys.com or wherever you find podcasts, and we are proud to be members of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
That it completely throws even it throws common sense out the window.
When we start off with Tsugomo Hanshiro coming to this manor, actually I'll back up even further than that. We start off with this diary entry, which is talking about what happened on this particular day, and nothing really happened until about 4:30 when this ronin showed up, and that opens up our story. And it's nice that we get a bookend of both that diary and then also this suit of armor that we see at the very beginning. And the suit of armor is just this big symbol that we have resting in the middle of this castle, this area, and then also just a symbol of the honor and the ideals again that really aren't met But yeah, we have this guy showing up and he's like, oh, I just want to use your courtyard to commit harakiri, to commit seppuku. I hope that's okay. And then he eventually gets taken to the lord of the manor, who tells him this story about somebody else who had come and asked for the same thing. And he's basically trying to dissuade our main character from committing harakiri, and just will stop every once in a while and say, like, are you sure you want to hear more? You're still determined to do this? And he just keeps laying this story out as far as this other ronin who had shown up once and wanted to commit suicide in their courtyard, and they determined that he was some sort of a scam artist, and that he was there to basically pretend to want to commit suicide, thinking that they would take pity on him, give him a few coins, and send him on his way and tell him, don't worry about it, kind of thing. But rather than take any sort of pity on this guy, they said, well, let's go ahead and have him commit suicide. And look at this, he doesn't even have swords that he owns. These are bamboo. Well, we're going to have him commit suicide with these bamboo swords. And it becomes one of the most harrowing scenes ever, watching this guy trying to commit suicide with these bamboo swords.
The jingling of the hilt of the sword is so unsettling, and it sticks with you. To watch the character kill himself with a bamboo sword, but you hear the hilt where the blade connects to the handle. I guess it's more of the hand guard. You hear it jingling as he tries to jam the bamboo blade into himself. And it's the worst sound in the world, because you know exactly what he's trying to do. And you understand what he's trying to do. And you know that blade is not sharp.
Right.
And you know that blade is a practice blade that people use to train with.
And we have this whole idea of the Koji Kaishakunun, the second, who is supposed to decapitate the person who's committing suicide. And they even say it's basically the opening of Lone Wolf and Cub Sword of Vengeance, where you have the young lord who's basically a child just take a fan and put it against his stomach, and then Ogami Ito chopped his head off. And they say, like, oh, we're not going to do that. You're going to have to cut in, cut up, cut over, and then we'll chop your head off. You really need to suffer. You really need to show that you are a true samurai. And the guy who is supposed to cut off his head never cuts off his head. He just lets the person suffer. What is the guy's name? Matome. He lets him suffer through the entire ordeal.
Yeah, and the worst part about it is the people in this castle, the what are they? The Lee clan?
Okay, I couldn't tell if it was that, or on my subtitles it looked like IYL or I, so I'm not sure.
So the worst part about the scene is that the Lee clan, they had a meeting prior to him committing harakiri, and they knew that it was bamboo swords.
Right.
And instead of giving him the ability to kill himself with a normal samurai sword, they forced him to do it with the bamboo sword, not even taking pity on someone who couldn't even afford actual swords. In their mind, afford actual swords. Again, you'll learn later in the story that there's a reason for him not having actual samurai swords.
So we have this whole framing device of the Lord telling this story to Tsugomo Hanshiro, and the way that Tatsuya Nakadai plays that role, just when the Lord will stop and it'll be like, still kind of checking in with him, are you sure you want to go through this? And he kind of perks up and it'll be like, oh, you mean, and he'll take his hand and run it across his belly like he's committing seppuku. And he's like, oh yeah, no problem. I'm still right on board. And he plays it with this really kind of sleepy, almost disinterested, yeah, I am set on this and I have lost all hope in the world, which he kind of has. But the way that he plays this part in this, it's almost like a mini play that's going on, and he's just the audience member listening to all of these things that are happening, versus when he takes the narrative and when he starts to tell the story, that then his whole demeanor changes, and it is just an amazing performance.
Yeah, I mean, it's a film within a film. The first 40 minutes of this film are someone else's story that is, you're given perspective on the story later in the film. But the first 40 minutes, I mean, you're kind of in the camp of the clan in a little bit because you're like, okay, the guy was trying to scam them. And, why they're doing it makes sense. They're trying to prevent other people from coming and taking advantage of them. But when you learn why he was doing it, it completely, like I said earlier, it changes the way you interpret everything in the later half of the film. But it is almost a film within a film.
Well, and then it becomes another film within a film, but now we have a different narrator this time, and now Tsukumo Hanshiro is taking over the reins when he is there, kneeling on the ground, and he's got the sword in front of him, he's got the little shelf, and he's got, he doesn't want to wear the white robes, he's going to kill himself in his dirty robes, and when he calls for a second, and they have to hurry up and try to find that guy who's not at the castle, so we'll send somebody to his house. Oh, geez, he's really sick. Okay, well, in the meantime, let me tell you a story that I know. And then he starts to tell this whole thing. And then you just suddenly realize, oh, shit, things just got real.
Well, because he immediately says, I know Chijiwa Matome. I know him. And like you said, you're just like, okay, so there is a very much an ulterior motive here. Because he asks him, he's like, did you know him? And he's like, never heard of him. And then when he starts telling his story, he's like, oh, but I did know him, and he was of some importance to me. And then you get, again, this completely dour, somber story about Hanshiro and his daughter and his friend who kills himself to prevent Hanshiro from killing himself because their lord is going to have to kill himself. So Hanshiro is spared killing himself by his friend, so he entrusts Hanshiro to take care of his son.
Who is our samurai or our ronin that we saw commit this horrible suicide. For folks listening at home, that's the character that committed this suicide, is basically the person that our main character has been put in charge of to take care of it, his best friend's son, who is also his ward, who is also in love with our main character's daughter. So now he's taking care of both his daughter and possibly his future son-in-law with this.
And there's a scene, and this is one of the better scenes in the film. I mean, again, this film, I don't think there's a scene in this film that's wasted. There's nothing in this, and this is almost 2.5 hour film. There is not a scene in this film that is not necessary. It is a completely streamlined film, and that is something to say for a film that's 2 hours and 13 minutes. But the scene where, I guess he's like a matchmaker, the landlord comes to Hanshiro's house, and he's trying to convince him to marry off his daughter Miho to marry her off, but send her away to another clan, and then she'd end up being this lord's concubine. And he, essentially says, I'm not gonna whore out my daughter for my own personal gain. And I think that that's one of the scenes where you completely get this kind of deep understanding of the kind of person Hanshiro is, because then and he's kind of this hard character throughout the film until you get to when he has a grandson, Kingo, and he's making baby noises, and he's letting kind of the Bushido kind of facade that they mention multiple times in the film, that he lets it drop. And it's such an interesting kind of interplay between those two sides of the character of Hanshiro.
Yeah, and that's, again, where we get to see this different face from this character that we've seen in, the sleepy-eyed guy becoming the hard-ass guy, becoming a human being, basically. And I gotta say, that baby was so cute. And then when the baby gets sick, that shot of the baby next to the mom, Miho, when she's sick as well, and just the way that the baby's laying there, I started to tear up a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, this film really is a tragedy, a total, Shakespeare couldn't have written it better himself.
Yeah, it does feel very Shakespearean, yes.
Right, and I mean, it's based off of I'm assuming a book. And so the film is based off of a book, Ibu Ronin Kai by Yasuhiko Takaguchi. So, I mean, it has its roots in literature, but Shakespeare really couldn't have written this any better, because it is so, again, it's just so depressing in a tragic way. And, Matome gets sick, and Matome has to go try to save his family because he doesn't have enough money, while Miho and Kingo are both dying from, I guess Miho has consumption, tuberculosis, because she's coughing up blood.
Yeah.
And she ends up transmitting something to Kingo. So Matome goes to this castle to try to get money because they had a conversation. Tsugomo and Matome had a conversation earlier in the film about how this was going on, and they were like, we would never do that. That's low even for us. But Matome lies and goes and does it, and then Miho and Kingo end up dying because of it, because they don't have any money to, what a surprise, take care of them because Matome dies.
Yeah.
It's so depressing.
It is so utterly depressing. And it's depressing, but at the same time, you know that our main character, that Hanshiro Tsugomo, is there for revenge. And you get to see him taking some revenge. Also in that flashback, you get to see him with 3 of the main swordsmen. And one of them in particular is the one who denied cutting off.
You won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times. Or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months. Or the Rogue heat-baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
The audio commentary. It's a dying art form, but here at One Track Mind, I, your wonky yet affable host Ryan Luis Rodriguez, analyze film through the prism of these embryonic forms of podcasting, one audio commentary at a time. Masterpieces, crapster pieces, live action, animation, cult classics, films literally no one has ever heard of. No track is too small and no track is too big. Join me and my guests from the entertainment world as we keep these features alive every other Tuesday. Hey, who else is going to discuss Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey one week and Citizen Kane the next? Us, that's who. Sure, you have to put up with my voice, but there's a certain give and take in this industry. That's One Track Mind, part of the Someone's Favorite Productions family and available wherever you get your podcasts.
Off Matome's head. So him there, and then he doesn't kill these guys. He humiliates them by cutting off their top knots, which basically is a death sentence and is supposed to sentence these guys. If they died without their top knots, they would be sent straight to hell. And then when the Lord finds out about that later on, he ends up, saying these guys, they defied Bushido. They need to kill themselves. So send somebody over there and make sure that these guys kill themselves, because so much of the last part of this movie is covering your tracks and trying to make things look proper, even though they weren't proper. There were some really awful things that happened, but it's a big cover up by the end of the film. And when we go back to that diary, and it's just like, 4:30 this guy showed up, but nothing really bad happened, and it's like all of these lies that are in the official record. So now we get to see a little glimpse into the truth behind what actually was going on at the time.
Well, and like you mentioned, I think, outside of Tatsuya Nakadai and Akira Ishihama, Tetsuro Tamba as Omadaka Hikokuro he plays the villain, the unflinching villain, so perfectly. And if you're a fan of James Bond, you'll recognize him as Tiger Tanaka from You Only Live Twice, where he plays a much more protagonist role as opposed to the unflinching bastard executioner role of this film. And I mean, the fight scene between him and Tatsuya Nakadai it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen put to film.
Well, so much of this movie is so beautiful. Like, when they're in that courtyard, you really notice the camera work. Like, some of the just, gentle push-ins, some of the quicker push-ins, just the way that the camera is moving at that point. Because so often in this movie, the camera is very static. But but with that sequence in particular, you really notice those camera moves, and everything is just framed really well. Like, I love the way that Akira Kurosawa films stuff or frame stuff, and seeing Kobayashi, did I say that right? Seeing the way that he films things, now it's like I really need to go see more of his work. I don't know why I have not seen more of his films, but he's got films that I hear about all the time, like Samurai Rebellion, Kwaidan, The Human Condition, but I've never actually sat down and watched those. Now, having seen Harakiri, I have to see these.
And from any account of the written review on cultureshock.com right now, Kwaidan is apparently amazing. So that's what I have heard. It is a amazing Japanese horror anthology film, which was made in like the 60s. So, ahead of its time, obviously on top of everything else. You mentioned the camera work in the courtyard. Every time the camera starts going in farther and farther on Rentaro Mikuni's face, who plays Saito Kaguya, the counselor who's kind of judging Tsugomo the entire film, you notice that he starts to look more and more like Matome. His eyes start to get more sullen, and the color starts to drain more out of his face, best you can tell. And I think that's it's such an interesting way of kind of interplaying the two, kind of the characters who know that kind of, the walls are closing in on them. Yeah. Unfortunately, Matome couldn't do anything about it, and Kaguya ends up, in the end, kind of getting the last laugh, unfortunately. But, I mean, again, the film wouldn't kind of have that gut punch of an ending if the quote-unquote villain got away with it.
Right.
Or didn't get away with it, excuse me.
Did you get a chance to see the Takashi Miike version of this?
I didn't.
I didn't either, though I did watch the trailer, and it felt like basically a color version of this film. Like, I wasn't seeing anything that looked like he had changed anything, which I think is probably smart, because this movie, it just fits together. You mentioned it's 2 hours and there's nothing wasted in here, and I totally agree. And I think hopefully Miike is smart enough to realize that and doesn't tack on some sort of weird third act twist or something. But the trailer looked very interesting, and I'm now kind of curious to see what he did with the same material, but I think that he treats it with a lot of respect.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about watching it, but at the end of the day, it's just one of those things where I'm not sure how much better a film could be being remade.
Right.
I mean, this film doesn't need to be remade, let's be honest here. There's nothing that I walked away from this film thinking I'd like to see a modern version of this.
Yeah. Well, and then so much of this, you can't just take this story and adapt it to set it in 1960, 1980, or 2018 with any ease, because this hinges on the Bushido rules and what was happening in, the 1630s so well. I mean, maybe you could move it up to like 1700s, 1800s, but so much of this is just reliant upon where we were with Bushido at the time and where Japan was in its history. So it just plays really pitch perfect in that particular space.
So I was thinking about kind of, speaking of remaking, so Takashi Miike remade it, but he remade it essentially, like you said, color version.
Right.
And it's essentially the same film set in the same time period. You could remake this film, but not in like a remake. You could essentially transpose the story into something that kind of resembles it, but using like a different, because like you said, the Bushido thing is kind of what the whole film hinges on. You could have it hinge on something else, because essentially the film ends up being about, a system that is, keeping itself alive at the cost of lives, right? Because that's ultimately what the film ends up being about, is, watching your own ass at the cost of everything else, including, common sense and human decency, especially later in the film, to the point where, Tsugomo says, I just want you to tell me that, that what you did wasn't worth it. Just say that you regret it, and that's it. And he refuses to. And so I was thinking, like, you could do this in like a political setting, and I think it could work. And I think that would be interesting. But again, I mean, I just don't think you need to mess with this film at all. I mean, again, I'm still kind of processing it, but I'm very high on this film for sure. Because it's just, you know, the ending really kind of crystallized it for me, but I think Tatsuya Nakadai's performance is really the thing that just, it's going to stay with me for a while.
And can you believe that that's the same guy that you just saw 2 weeks ago in Kill? I mean, he looks somewhat similar, but just the performances, the acting is so different from one role to the other.
No, I can't. I honest to God can't. It's almost like this character in this film reminds me of the character in Kill. If the character in Kill had no sense of humor,
right?
None whatsoever, because it's kind of like the disgraced Ronin thing again. But this is more of a put on in some respects than in Kill, where you're meant to take that at face value.
He plays that burnt out shell of a man so well in this. And I mean, yeah, he's kind of burnt out in Kill, but yeah, he's definitely is laughing at Bushido and laughing at the situation he's in, rather than here where he's more crying and angry about it.
Yeah. And again, I think it all comes back to Tatsuya Nakadai's eyes.
Oh, yeah.
His eyes are so expressive, and they're just, he conveys his performance through them. And also, again, they're not, I mean, we didn't watch this film with English dub, and again, we've had this conversation more times than I can count, but you shouldn't watch foreign films dub, period. But you can tell when he's giving his lines, the sadness and despair in his voice. And like you said, he ends up sleepwalking through the first 30 minutes of this film on top of everything else.
And just those, like, when he raises his eyebrows to verify, like, oh, you're talking about, and then he'll do that hand signal. I mean, there is a slight little bit of humor in there. Like, the second time he did it, I laughed at it happening, and I'm not laughing 15, 20 minutes from then. There's no humor left in there, but it is great. You know, I'm not saying that this is a joyless film. This is, like you said, a gut punch of a movie, and one that I'm so glad now that I have seen.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. Well, let's take a quick break. We'll play some ads, and we'll finish up talking about the film when we get back.
Have a hunger for horror? A yen for Yelp yarns? Then give your blood-curdled bones a boon and tune in to Chronicles from the Crypt. Join sordid slime slingers Casualty Chris and Father Malone as they take on HBO's groundbreaking television series Tales from the Crypt. Here's what the rotting and rancid rabble are saying about Chronicles from the Crypt.
No!
Tune in to Chronicles from the Crypt. You have nothing to lose except your life.
Who is Carl Kolchak?
He's a reporter.
Now that is news, Vincenzo. News! And we are a newspaper. We are supposed to print news, not suppress it.
With the INS.
What's an INS?
Independent News Service, sir. Founded in 1904 by Enrico Paluzzi.
Who seems to have a nose for the strange and unusual.
Well, last year in Las Vegas, I uncovered a series of murders that turned out to have been committed by a vampire.
And what is the Kolchak Tapes?
It's a podcast.
All about Carl Kolchak.
What's a Kolchak?
The Night Stalker.
And where can you get it?
On iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at www.kolchaktapes.com.
As foolish a game as any that Gory the Ghoul could make up.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
Week after week, I'm mesmerized by the focus given great films and questionable films alike. But every episode is a learning and entertaining experience.
This is hands down the best movie podcast. They cover so many different genres across so many years, from obscure movies to blockbusters.
If there's only one podcast about movies and cinema that you listen to, make it this one.
The Projection Booth Podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
In 1985, a curious phenomenon occurred. The Twilight Zone returned to television, featuring all new tales of mystery and imagination from the minds of Ray Bradbury, Harlan Ellison, George R.R. Martin, and Stephen King. Dreams for Sale. The Twilight Zone 85 podcast looks back at that.
You won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times. Or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months. Or the Rogue, heat-baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
And of shadow and substance, and re-examines the groundbreaking successor to Rod Serling's legacy. Featuring new interviews with the show's creators and cast, Dreams for Sale can be found on iTunes and at twilightzone85.com. Dreams for Sale. We'll be waiting for you in the Twilight Zone.
All right, we are back and we are finishing up talking about Harakiri. So again, I've kind of asked you this every week because I just don't have that much of a frame of reference for samurai films. But this film against the samurai films that you've seen, I mean, is it in your top? Is it near the top? Is it part of the top 5? I mean, where would you put this for other samurai films you've seen?
I think this jettisoned itself pretty close to the top of the list. You know, I kind of like when we were talking about Czech New Wave stuff, like I tend to like things with a little bit of humor and subversion in them. So things like Yojimbo and Sanjuro. Yojimbo is probably always going to be one of my favorite films. And then things that are more subversive, like the Lone Wolf and Cub movies, which are just, you know, so balls out crazy. But I would say for proper samurai movie, I would say this is definitely right near the top of the list. This and Seven Samurai, I think, are kind of neck and neck as far as looking at the samurai way of life and having these amazing performances. And, you know, Seven Samurai is an epic tale. Like, it takes 3 hours for this movie to be told, and it really, you know, there's some movement from, you know, one area to another, and the whole gathering of the team and all this kind of stuff. This movie, 134 minutes, takes place primarily in one setting, maybe moving from room to room, but my God, you feel like you've gone on a journey by the end of this, just because of the emotional journey that you go on with these characters, and the way that you move from one narrator to another really is so effective. It doesn't have to be hundreds of miles, thousands of people, you know, a cast of millions, those kind of things. It's a small story, but it really sucks you in.
Yeah, it's a very quiet film. I mean, there's not even a lot of fighting. There's not a lot of like samurai, you know, fights, sword fights, which again, I think a lot of people kind of expect from the samurai, you know, the samurai genre of film. And there's what, like 4? There's the 3 fights with the 3 kind of people that had to do with the execution, and then the final fight, and that's it. And that all comes within like 5 minutes of each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty tight.
It's a slow
like
moving.
that.
It's a pretty slow moving film, but right at the end, it really ramps up. And again, slow moving is not a bad thing. It gives the time and effort to let the story and the characters really breathe and do something interesting. And it's a nuanced film with a lot of nuanced performances. And the way it tells the story, again, it's very interesting. And the framing device in this film of kind of telling 2 different stories, I think is so interesting, and it's so smart that by the end of the film, it's just you're emotionally drained by the end of the film. Because, you know, at the end of the film, like we've been talking about, Tsugomo dies, and everything is essentially swept under the rug by the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And no one is the wiser. The guys that Tsugomo killed in the fight, they died of an illness. The samurai that had their top knots cut off, they died of an illness. Tsugomo came and killed himself with no problem, and that's it.
Yeah, and that red armor is back in place. No one knows any different from what happened.
Yeah, and it's so disheartening because, I mean, again, not to get too political, but I mean, again, you look at just any government, and that's what governments do. They cover things up, and they do things to keep themselves moving, regardless of who and what they walk over and run over to do so. And it's again, it's an important thing to learn, folks. Unfortunately.
Are you saying this was a false flag operation?
Oh my God, Jesus Christ! Well, I don't want to get sued. Okay, I don't want to get banned from YouTube and PayPal and Twitter and Facebook and everywhere. What is he on now? Is he on like Periscope? Is that what he's on?
Maybe Vine? I'm not sure.
Vine? Mike, Vine doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, my bad.
He's on Snapchat. I'm on Snapchat Live, coming to you from the InfoWars headquarters.
Every 30 seconds, you have to update. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate kind of indictment in this film. It's an indictment of the feudal system of Japan. But again, you can really just translate it to kind of, now. And again, it's the irony of the film is that seppuku Harakiri is meant to retain your honor by killing yourself. And Matome ends up losing all of his honor because he's forced to kill himself in a way that is so humiliating and disgraceful that, again, it's ironic that that's what they used him. That's how he killed himself. And it's just in such a way that you sit there and you watch the scene and it's so hard to watch.
Yeah. When they bring his body in and he has all that blood on those white robes. Oh
yeah. And again, it's, they talk about what's more important, honor or the idea of honor, because there's no real honor in anything that happens in the film.
No. And the people that could or should kill themselves are the ones who don't.
Yeah. Like Kageu, like Saito Kageu, who is the counselor. He should kill himself for doing what he did. But ultimately, again, they died because they were sick. He killed himself. Sweep it all under the rug. We all have honor. And the shogunate comes by and says, you guys did a really good job of keeping the faith, as it were. And it's like, Jesus, this is so depressing. And they have to kill him with guns at the end, on top of everything else. They have to kill him with guns because they can't kill him by using samurai swords. So where's the honor in that?
He wasn't going to go down easy, and I appreciate that.
Where's the honor in that? Yeah, where's the honor in that? So... Well, Mike, what would you give this film out of 5?
I would give it 5 out of 5 without hesitation.
Yeah, I'm with you. 5 out of 5 all the way. It's one of the best films I have ever seen. And if you get a chance to watch it, guess where it is? It's on Filmstruck yet again, and it's on Criterion. And the Criterion copy of the film is a fantastic version of the film. So make sure to check it out. All right, we're going to take another break and we'll play the preview for the next Kulturecast.
What happened that night at the Abaddon Hotel? What is that?
It's everything.
Sarah, have you watched those?
No.
So you have no idea what's on them?
How beautiful is this?
Hell House.
Look, there it is. Here we go.
What was that?
I don't know.
You have heard the rumors about this.
There are no rumors about this place. No rumors, we talked about this.
It's supposed to be haunted.
Alright, dude, lock me in. Cool, then.
Godspeed.
Hey, man. How many freaks did we have?
3 freaks. What's going on?
Are you sure?
5. Let me out! Let me out, Tony!
It was when we started sleeping there that things started to change.
You heard that, right? I'm telling you, we have to call it off right now.
We have no business being here. Alex is more confident than ever.
I think we're next.
Go back up! Go back up!
That's right, on the next Kulturecast, we are talking about Hell House LLC. That film will be kicking off Horrortober for The Awakening, where we will be talking about found footage films all month. It is going to be a jammed-packed month. We have interviews for almost every podcast. I am so looking forward to it. It is going to be a hell of a month. We really overdo it here at Culture Shocked for Halloween, so make sure to check that out. Until then, Mike, where can people find you?
They can find me over at the projection booth, which is at projectionboothpodcast.com, or they can hear me once a month on the Kolchak tapes, which is kolchaktapes.com, or also once a month at Dreams for Sale, which is twilightzone85.com, where you, me, and Father Malone talk about Twilight Zone 85. It is a brand new venture and shaping up to be pretty good. Interviews coming along pretty good with that one too. Really kind of raising the stakes on Twilight Zone discussions.
And apparently quite topical since Twilight Zone is coming back, folks, on CBS Access. You have to pay for it. Or just illegally download it like everyone else did with Star Trek Discovery.
Exactly.
Yep. Sorry, CBS, but go fuck yourselves. Please head on over to Kulturecast.com where you can check out more about today's episode. You'll find links over to iTunes where you can rate and review the show, and to Patreon where you can kick a couple dollars our way. You can follow me on Twitter at CultureStash. You can follow Mike on Twitter at ProBoothcast. Big thanks to Eric for the new intro outro music. He worked on that hard and long and fast and quick from what I've heard from the ladies. And make sure to check out the next Kulturecast.